Just last week I spoke about how Premier Andrews had failed Victorians. Well, it seems to me because of the Premier's inactions, Victoria is now drowning with record numbers of people catching COVID-19. It's also drowning not through just the incompetence and ineptness of their ministers for health and housing and Victoria's chief medical officer, but through their combined arrogance and hubris. Because think of this, they're actually content with how they've been handling the crisis, which has shrouded Victoria. That's incredible. They shouldn't be thinking like that. And Premier Andrews should be considering sacking them. He can no longer allow himself to be guided by incompetent ministers who are out of their depth. And a chief medical officer who I think is just simply not up to it. I know it's a tough call, but all three have contributed to the economic and social disaster that the COVID pandemic is wreaking on Victoria. And it's a terrible thing to consider. Simply put, they have not only failed him, that is the Premier of Victoria, but they've let down all Victorians. And as each day passes, the state is losing its fight for economic survival. Premier Andrews has a real responsibility to serve the interests of all Victorians, not just those three, Mikakos, Wynne or Sutton. And the events of this week have only reinforced that thought. It has been a week of disaster, a train wreck in fact for the government. The COVID numbers continue to rise dramatically, and they're doing it every day. Melbourne is currently stage 3 lockdown. Think of that. Victoria's borders are closed. No one wants to know about Victorians. And home learning has been reintroduced. Now, with the borders shut, Melburnians are virtually imprisoned in their own state. And understandably, they're angry. It's taking a heavy toll on the entire state. It's taking a toll on the economy, the jobs front, and of course our collective mental health. The mismanagement by Daniel Andrews and his so-called three amigos should be the focus of a royal commission with the terms of reference set by the federal government, not the Premier of Victoria. Victoria can no longer operate as though it's on a bit of a yo-yo up and down. That strategy is flawed. In fact, it's destructive. It shows the government is reactive, not proactive. And it also shows that it hasn't got a clear vision or a strategy to get life back to a semblance of normality, except to consider harsher laws of imprisonment. The Premier has got to think long and hard. What he's doing is simply not working. That could have been a strategy that they employed in March. But imprisoning Melburnians and stripping them of their freedom is not a solution for tomorrow. You did that to the residents of the Flemington and North Melbourne community, Mr. Premier, just 10 days ago. That didn't work well, did it? And if your plan is to impose stage 4 type restrictions, I think they will destroy Victoria's cafe and food industry that's currently running on fumes. It would also go a long way to creating massive job losses, unsustainable ones, dramatically impact the rate of our mental health issues, which Victorians will have to endure, and we'll also see an explosion in domestic violence figures. Already they've risen at a rate we can't imagine. They'd get worse. And a potential collapse of the health system wouldn't be beyond the cards. Now, rather than continue to destroy the economy, let's be proactive. Why not create a new economy? Allow people to get back to some form of normal. Now, this is a potential solution. Not the solution, but it could help. The state government could work with the manufacturer of PPEs and go on to supply Victorian households with masks and hand sanitisers. Now, isn't that a far better option than destroying people's livelihoods, wrecking the economy and adding to their mental health issues? Last week, in an interview the Informer conducted with Amit Dini, who's a social worker and a resident of the North Melbourne Commission flats, we broke the news that the government had failed its people and its Premier 3 months ago when they failed to listen to the concerns of residents of those flats who tried to advise the Health Minister that the towers were an incubator for the spread of the virus. As someone at the time in those discussions put it, they were like vertical cruise ships. Minister Wynne, his advisors and the department did what? They were told the situation was dangerous and the residents needed assistance, but those pleas for help fell on deaf ears. The minister ignored them. And in fact, the department told the residents that there was nothing to see here. Well, who was proven right? Now, rather than work with them, the arrogance and the hubris of the then minister, his advisors and the key figures within the department was deplorable. And this alone should be enough to see them sacked. Premier Andrews, you sought to imprison and racially vilify people based on ethnicity, rather than take control following the incompetence shown by your minister, Mr. Wynne. Now, right now, you need to stand up, Mr. Premier. You need to stand up, right a ship that is listing badly. It's even rudderless, and it seems that it's going nowhere fast. You and your ministers have been negligent in how you've handled this COVID spike. And again, this is the part that we beat on last week, I'll say it again. You've allowed the unions to dictate the terms and tell you what they want. Mr. Premier, the unions don't run Victoria. You do, by the mandate of the people. There are Victorians, consider this, whose loved ones live interstate. They've not seen, they've not had a chance to hold on to them or the opportunity to put their arms around their children for months. Now that's untenable. Mr. Premier, it's beyond acceptable, and for those people, I think it's intolerable. How much longer do you think people must pay for the ineptness of your ministers and not be able to be with their children or their partners for that matter? We can no longer endure reverting to a strategy that isn't working. The time has come. The time has come to mandate the wearing of masks when you're outside the home. It should be compulsory. No other way to look at it. Implement a 3-metre physical distancing rule, not just the 1.5, and encourage people to carry hand sanitisers. Crucifying Victorians for the ineptness of their ministers is wrong. Deflecting your ministers' incompetence and blaming the ethnic communities in Victoria for their mistakes as the problem is racist and a bridge too far, Mr. Premier. And by suggesting Victorians can't be trusted to make sensible decisions around social distancing, well, that's offensive. The time has come for you to actually lead again and show Victorians the leader that you were and that they first saw in March of this year, the one who was able to make the right decisions. Sack Mikakos, sack Wynne and sack Sutton. And remind the unions that they don't run Victoria. You're the only one who has the power and the position to resuscitate the state from drowning. And importantly, you can no longer allow yourself to be misled by the ineptitude of others.